Hi there. Welcome to Buckeye Bigfoot. You know how people say kids can find trouble when they're not even looking for it? Well, that's true. But sometimes the trouble finds those kids when it's not looking for them either. And that's kind of what happened one night. It was a dark night, and that trouble, rose up out of the water looking mean as all get out. And, well, you know what? How about I just tell you the story as we ride on down the trail into Sasquatch Valley? So go on, grab your snackage and get saddled up. When we get back, if you're so inclined, you can hang out at the fire for a few minutes and listen to a few things that I kind of want to update everyone on. Otherwise, I'm ready. Are you? Let's go. I grew up in a very small town at the top end of Morgan County, Alabama. Back in the 70s, I knew just about everyone in our small town. We had exactly 2 stoplights on the main street going through town. We had 1 grocery store and 1 catch-all kind of hardware store. There was 1 post office and a couple very tiny miscellaneous shops. But that was all. Down there, the hot summer seemed to stretch on forever, which, as kids, was paradise. All of us kids had bikes, a pocket knife, maybe a cane pole, and for us, that was all the freedom we needed. My best buddy was Ronnie, and Ronnie and me, well, we figured out real quick that Crooked Creek was the place to catch catfish. They weren't out in the open of the creek, mind you. No, the good ones stacked up in the deep holes right under that old wooden bridge. Now you got to picture it. That bridge was older than my granddaddy. Planks were all gray and soft with rot in many places. The creek water was black and was slow flowing underneath it. At night, you could smell the mud from that creek before you were near enough to hear the water trickling. And we always went at night, because that's when the catfish were hungry. One July evening, the summer night air was so thick with humidity it was more like trying to breathe through syrup than air. The bullfrogs were thumping out on the bank. Ronnie nudged me and said, "Hey, let's sneak out. Hit the bridge. I bet we haul in a mess of catfish." I didn't even think. I said, "Yeah, let's do that." We grabbed our rods, a couple jars of stink bait, and sneaked out long after our folks had gone to bed. The moon wasn't all the way up yet, but the world was very dark. I mean real dark. It was that kind where the trees all seemed to lean in over the road, like they're listening to you, like out of some old scary cartoon. It was that kind of dark, and that, of course, is the best kind of night to get yourself a mess of catfish. By the time we made it down to the bridge, I noticed the crickets were all hushed up. I did notice it, but I didn't say anything. I thought they hushed up because we were traipsing through, though that had never hushed them up before. Mostly, I didn't want Ronnie calling me chicken. Over the creek, the sky above was open and clear. We could see stars and the sliver of a pale crescent moon. The light coming down was faint, but enough that we could make out shapes in the shadows, and it bounced up off the creek waters. We settled under the bridge and got set up for fishing. In every other way, it was a perfect, idyllic summer night. It was Alabama hot and sticky with no air movement, yes, but the water lapping on the banks in a steady rhythm, that's something I can still hear in my mind to this very day. And all the while, tree frogs and cicadas were making a solid background of noise for us. And the mosquitoes? Well, those weren't part of a perfect summer night, but there's no having a summer without them, is there? And all the while, the old boards of the bridge above us would pop and creak. My daddy told me once it was from the changing temperatures and the humidity at night, kind of the way a house would move and settle every night. I don't know if that's exactly right, but it made me less jumpy as a boy when I thought about it that way. It was a good and normal hot summer night. Well, for about 10 or 15 minutes anyway. Then we heard it. A splash. Not a small splash like a fish splashing around or a bullfrog jumping in the water. This was big, heavy. Then I heard the swishing in the water, and I somehow knew something was wading in the shallows just upstream. It was dark, but I saw the shadow of Ronnie's head turn towards me. Then he whispered, "Deer?" No, I thought. Deer don't wade slow and loud like that. That swish, swish sound was more like a two-legged person walking through the water. I'm thinking that, and then there was this strange grunting noise. Not real loud, but more like an involuntary grunt, like when you're old and you try to get up off the floor. It's like that. And I know deer blow and snort, but I've never heard 'em grunt, not like that. Me and Ronnie both were looking upstream, even though it was too dark to see anything clearly. We figured we were about to get caught out by somebody who would then rat us out to our parents. And that would mean Daddy would have to make a show of tanning my hide with a belt just to make Mama happy. And that's when the smell hit us, with our heads turned right towards it, and then we got our snoots full of it. Lordy, I'll never forget it. Like rotten eggs and wet dog left out in the sun on an Alabama summer day. It turned my stomach right over. Ronnie gagged a little and whispered, "What is that?" I couldn't answer. Not only did I not have an answer, I could barely breathe in enough to get a word out. The smell was that bad. The waiter started to come closer and closer. That's when I knew for certain the waiter was walking on two legs, which meant they were not any of the animals around there. You could hear it in the cadence. Step, splash, drag. Step, splash, drag. It was like it had legs that were too long for the water that it was in, and feet so big and heavy they were getting sucked down in the muddy bottom on every step. We pressed back against the bridge piling, our hearts hammering. I had my pocket knife out. Like that would do a lick of good, but you use what you've got. Then, out of the shadowed darkness, it appeared. At first, I thought a man was out there. I saw they were very tall, broad-shouldered, with arms that hung low. But then they bent down. I saw the thin shine of moonlight on the water roll off hair, not skin. Thick, black hair clinging to it like wet carpet. There was no mistaking it. Definitely not skin or some kind of clothing, unless someone was wearing a fur coat on a hot summer night in Alabama. A very, very big someone, that is. It leaned into the current, arms swinging out, and in just a couple seconds it scooped up a catfish roughly the size of my leg. Then it lifted it like it was nothing, and it looked like it was holding it just right, not touching either the pectoral or the dorsal fins. People think a catfish stings you with its whiskers, but that's not it. It's the fins that will get you. So, this thing or this being knew how to handle a catfish. I saw it reposition the wriggling fish so it was belly up, still avoiding the fins. It brought its belly up to the mouth and took a large bite out of the middle of the fish, biting straight clean through it. I couldn't believe it. I thought, I'm seeing this wrong, because maybe it's so dark, but at the same time I know I didn't see it wrong. I know what I saw, and the sound of that wet, squishy bite echoed under the bridge, and it matched what I saw. A low night breeze came just then against our backs. I felt it cooling my sweat. I felt it, but I didn't process it. I was in a stupor at what I was seeing, I guess. The thing chewed, swallowed, and started to take another bite when the breeze reached it. It was the breeze that carried our scent. It suddenly lifted its head and sniffed the air like some bloodhound, and then its head turned in a snap right at us. Now from the moonlight I could see 2 amber eyes that glowed in the dark, catching just enough star and moonlight to show what they were. They weren't round like a deer or narrow like a man's, but they were big and set wide apart. Those eyes locked on us like it had been out there hunting for us all night. Next to me, Ronnie made some kind of noise in his throat. It wasn't loud, but that tiny sound was all it took. The creature rose up to its full height out of the water pouring off its body, dropped the 2 halves of the catfish, and it let out a growl that I could feel in my ribs. I don't even remember standing up. 1 second I was crouched down. The next I was running full tilt, smacking my shins on roots, busting through brush, going blindly at full speed. It's a wonder I didn't run smack into a tree and knock myself out. Ronnie was right behind me. Both of us too scared to do anything but run. We weren't yelling or anything, but we were breathing hard and running. We didn't stop until we hit the county road. We were all bent over, gasping for air. Our rods and all of our equipment were left down at the creek. Shaky legs got us home, and along the way there was a promise made. We weren't telling anyone about this. And that bridge? Well, I went back there plenty of times. Just never alone, and never at night. But I rode the bridge on my bike more than a few times that summer. I would look over and I would see fish heads and bones scattered all over the rocks below, picked clean. I told myself a raccoon did that. Or maybe it was some weird homeless person eating raw fish. But I didn't believe any of that myself. First time I rode over that bridge again was 2 days later after we saw it. Me and Ronnie went out there together. I stopped and got off my bike and looked over the bridge, right where our stuff should have been. But there was nothing there. Of course, anyone else could have come along and seen all of our stuff and went down and got it. But if you asked me and Ronnie, we thought that creature got rid of our stuff. Well, that's what our young minds thought at the time anyway. Today, I don't know. Maybe it was some weird homeless person after all. Maybe they were down there eating raw fish, and that's what we saw that night. We really didn't have a homeless population in our little town back then, but we did have a couple crazy people, and they did walk down to the creek sometimes to wash their clothes as best they could. I never heard of them, though, going at night. And the few that I knew of, well, they weren't the kind to have fur coats of any kind, and they sure wouldn't have worn them in the summer, crazy though they might have been. But we didn't really believe for 1 second that it was a homeless person, or one of the crazies, or even a person at all. I know what I saw standing knee-deep in that creek, eating catfish under the moonlight, and it wasn't any man. There's only one word for it: Bigfoot. And yeah, we got 'em in our area. I didn't know it then, but I do now. I don't live there anymore. But even if I did, you wouldn't catch me going down there on dark nights, not even as a grown man. You know, some people say they don't know exactly what they saw, and others, like the author of tonight's encounter, they know exactly what they saw, even if they didn't have a word for it at the time, even when they are very young. They believe they know. All right, well, as many of you probably already know, and in case you don't, I have some sad news to pass along. We lost a very important person in the Bigfoot community yesterday. we lost Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum. And here's what his family posted on his Facebook, telling us that it was brain cancer that took him. I wish I could say that I knew the man, but I didn't. I did briefly meet him in 2019 at a Bigfoot festival here in Ohio. We talked for just a minute or two as I bought his book, and he was a genuinely kind man with no apparent ego. I listened to the people before me, and I listened to people who went after me. I tell you, the man was just genuinely friendly and kind. Now, if you know many people within the Bigfoot world, personality-wise, I mean, you will know that many of them have incredibly huge egos. I'm talking the size of Texas and Alaska. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't really care. But when you do meet someone who doesn't seem to have that kind of ego, you notice it. And I noticed it in Dr. Meldrum. I spoke to him briefly, yes, just telling him that I had just started this channel. Oh, I think I had 2 or 3 videos up at the time, something like that. But he asked a lot of questions about it. And then he encouraged me to keep at it, saying there were lots and lots of encounters out there that just hadn't been told yet. Of course, he was right. Now, that's all the contact I ever had with Dr. Meldrum. But you see that? I still have the business card that he gave me that day. And when he gave it to me, do you know what he said? He said, if I ever have any questions, just shoot him an email. And the funny thing is, I think he genuinely meant it. In many ways, Dr. Meldrum was a force of real change within the Bigfoot community. He was a strong scientific voice that advocated for Bigfoot research. We have much to thank him for. And I hope we did before because, well, now it's too late. I hope he knew it. He will be sorely missed. All right, my Sasquatch. Well, that's going to bring us to the end of tonight's video. I really kind of have a million more things I'd like to say, but I just don't have the heart for it tonight. It's been a just terrible couple weeks here in the United States. I'm just going to go have a cup of coffee and sit on my back porch for a while. In the meantime, I want to thank all of you for coming along on the journey tonight and to remind you that until we do meet up again, to always remember, absence of proof is not proof of absence. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Thanks for listening.